Good afternoon, Sean here, Mountains Garage. Some days I never know what my background is going to be, and I got to make sure it's not too messy. I don't want you getting the wrong idea that I'm, messy. Today we're going to strip one of the two brake drum Turbo 400s that I dragged home 2 or 3 weeks ago. Awesome purchase, low price. The first one I'm stripping, the guy said that his son was playing with the dipstick and broke it off, and it sat outside a few nights while it was raining. Fortunately, that's the one I did first, and there was only a little bit of water and it barely even reached the filter. So no problem. Not like some that the water level keeps rising all the way up into the rotating assembly. So as you'll see, we discovered what it is and what it can be, and I'm totally happy with the purchase. I'll go over it one more time. In my findings, and if you break down the codes, most of the time, and with General Motors or any company, nothing is absolute. If it's a 10,000 GVW motorhome with 16-inch wheels, it has just a regular angle cut planetary unit. I've taken a whole bunch of those apart and been disappointed every time, because if you're going to go through the hassle of, if you strip the motorhome and getting rid of the motorhome, you hope at least the transmission is something, special. Now it's debatable whether the 475 straight cut planetary is even worth the hassle. I mean, GM did it for a reason. It's supposed to have less thrust back and forth, but they're hard to come by. And if people request them and you don't have any in stock as a builder, you can't fulfill that need. So I take them when I can. I've never known them to be weaker. I don't know if they're stronger. We can debate that until the end of time. Personally, I have them in my personal transmission, and I'm willing to field test it if I ever finish the project. So if the motorhome has 19.5 wheels and a 14,000 gross vehicle weight rating, I can almost guarantee you, that it's going to have the straight cut planetaries. So in this case, I only had the tag, and the tag indicated this was just a 30 series Chevy or GMC. It should not be straight cut. Let's find out what happens. I'm just starting to strip the 1989 FKA code Turbo 400 with a brake drum. I don't believe it's a TH475, but of course we're going to find out here in a few minutes. I don't know if the motorhome had 16-inch wheels and a 10,000 GVW rating, or if it had 19.5 wheels and a 14,000 GVW rating, which would guarantee it's a TH475, in my findings anyway. That's the difference. There are many Turbo 400 transmission with brake drums in the motorhome configuration. Unfortunately, and fortunately, depending on how you look at it, this transmission is very clean on the outside and on the inside. So clean on the outside that previously when they removed it, they snapped off all the cover bolts. No big deal, because I'm going to cut the ears off anyway. He told me, the guy I bought it from anyway, that it had only sat outside for a few nights since his son broke off the dipstick, which is indeed broken. So I brought it home, and I immediately put this one up on the bench and flipped it up in this position and wanted to drain it, but of course you can't with the brake drum on it. And I wanted to let the tail housing bolts soak. So I popped the governor cover off, and even doing that, despite being careful, 2 out of 4 snapped right off. And same just now, even after a week of soaking, I broke off 1, 2 pan bolts, so we'll have to do a little bit of welding and extracting, but he was correct. There was only minimal water that came out. It just touched the filter, perhaps the manual valve a little bit, even though nothing else on the valve body is touched, and it's super clean. So let's rip it apart and see what we got. So it's a full week later. I've been letting the tail housing bolts soak in many positions. and I've heated and cooled them a few times, and I've got all of them out except for one that broke, but it is hanging below the case, so I should be able to weld a nut on it and get it out, and a few others are going to need thread repair, but it did not crack here or on the other side in the same position, which is common. They'll split right there, so far so good. It's a 1989 transmission. You can tell the bolts take a 9/16 hex instead of a 5/16. There's still 5/16 thread into the case, but these have a bigger head with an O-ring underneath. You can tell by that crosshatch pattern. So now let's get the pump out and see if we have an 8-bolt case. See if it's a TH475 or a Turbo 400. My gut feeling is still a Turbo 400, but let's find out. Giving credit where credit is due, this little pump popper I bought on eBay works pretty slick. Well, it's all tore apart for your viewing pleasure. Right off the bat, it's a 6-bolt case with the potential for number 7 and number 8. Again, these are my numbering system. There's a void where the lug should be, so she'll forever be a 6 or a 7-bolt case, no big deal. So as long as I can remove the 2 broken governor cover bolts and the 1 stud sticking out of the back and repair all the threads, this will be a nice case, and I actually have a use for it. Often when I'm building a transmission, like a mild street transmission, I hate to waste, if you will, a perfectly good 8-bolt case that might come in handy when I want to put a bell housing or somebody requests it. Some people know what they're looking for and are willing to pay for the difference. So, case, nothing spectacular. I'll bite into the other details, but what we're looking for, it is a 475. She's straight cut. I always find them interesting, and this is when I wish I filmed it live, because there is no silencer ring. It does have the bronze thrust washer on the back of the center support. Sometimes they're plastic, sometimes they're bronze. You never know. Still has a plastic one in between that will take the one from the rear and substitute. We've gone over that many times. When you rollerize the output, you can move that thrust washer forward. The forward clutch is a 5 clutch. Still read the part numbers on the clutches. From the factory, no seal on the drum, so it fills both sides of the piston in the forward. It's a big heavy-duty application. They don't mind if it bangs into gear. Always a good mod. I never put that seal back in either drum. You may notice it has the old style aluminum pistons. Not to be confused with the new style, which is exactly what I expected in a 1989 transmission, is this weaker style aluminum piston with a small application area. It looks like an old Buick hubcap. They work. They're on par, I guess, with the steel piston. You can modify them. I mean, they're not completely junk, but I was pleasantly surprised that we got the old style, including the center support. If I flipped it over, also sports an aluminum piston. That's awesome. And it has the round back direct drum. No squeaking. I've already had it apart. It has a 16 element sprag. We'll update that to the 34 elements, so that drum is awesome. It's also a 6 clutch drum from the factory. Still read the part numbers. Good stuff. And just for those that don't want to go back and watch my other 70 or so videos, once you get the brake drum off, the output shaft is the same as a 2-wheel drive unit with a fixed yoke. It has the threads on the back and the O-ring groove. So I just grind off or machine off the O-ring groove and put a regular slip yoke on it. Yes, you can run a counterboard yoke. If you want to leave the groove on, just remove the O-ring. I prefer to just remove it. And what you do, it's here nor there. As with most motorhomes, I don't know the mileage, but I'm sure it's low. Everything is in perfect shape. And this is, if you remember, I bought 2 brake drum Turbo 400s, not knowing what they're going to have inside. And this one had the dipstick broken off and had a little bit of water in the pan, but it never even got to the filter. So an awesome find. I'm completely happy. And this one only cost me $75. A super rare find. And I bought two for $150. Well, there you go. Life is truly like a box of chocolates. You never know what's inside until you bite in. In this case, I'm completely happy. I'm only going to use the case. Unfortunately, that piece requires the most work because it has 3 broken bolts, but I've been down this road before. That poor transmission was so dry, and those steel bolts sitting inside that dry aluminum, they almost weld themselves in place. I soaked it for over a week, heated and cooled, and in the end I had my best 6-point socket, a ratchet, a pry bar holding it together, pulling on it with a piece of pipe over the ratchet, and finally got it to break loose because the bolt head wanted to round off. So, but we got it in the end. I hope you get something out of this. I don't make a habit of doing just transmission disassembly videos, but in this case I love the discovery process. You never know what you're gonna get. In this case, couldn't be happier. I can't wait to do the other one, and we will someday soon. Thanks for watching. Catch you soon.